Over the next few weeks, we will be visiting calling stories in the Bible, from Samuel to Moses and Elijah to the parabolic Good Samaritan. And as we do so, we'll be reflecting on the nature of calling. It's a word we use a lot in prayers and church speak. But what do we mean exactly when we say it? There's a broader and related question, a universal question that is on all of our minds from time to time. We might phrase it like this: why am I here? What is my purpose? Am I on the right track? One of my favorite books is Willa Cather's Song of the Lark, which tells the story of Thea Kronborg, a young girl raised in a small train town in Colorado who feels within herself the gift of great music. And despite long odds, makes her way first to Chicago and then to Germany, and finally becomes a famous opera singer in New York City. But more than the narrative of her life's events, the story is about gift and calling, the thing that can't be denied within someone, which expresses their meant to be. What is the thing that can't be denied within you? What is your meant to be? Shortly before her 13th birthday, Thea has a conversation with her eccentric old world piano teacher in which he asks her interpretation of an obscure opera's text. He's pushing her to see if she has the understanding of life that would enable her to be more than a technical singer and instead an interpreter of ideas. Seeing that spark in her, he shouts out in German, "And without this, there is no art." And he leaves her to wander the Colorado dunes by herself in a turmoil. Cather writes, Thea did not altogether understand what Wunsch was talking about, and yet, in a way, she knew. She knew, of course, that there was something about her that was different. But it was more like a friendly spirit than like anything that was part of herself. She thought everything to it, and it answered her. Happiness consisted of that backward and forward movement of herself. That something came and went, she never knew how. Sometimes she hunted for it and could not find it. Again, she lifted her eyes or stepped out of doors or wakened in the morning and it was there. Under her cheek, it usually seemed to be, or over her breast, a kind of warm sureness. And when it was there, everything was more interesting and beautiful, even people. This warm sureness that seems to rest under her cheek, with whom she discusses everything, is her calling. It's the part of her that tells her again and again that she was made to sing, that thing that can't be denied. And it keeps her from giving up, even in dark moments of uncertainty. So in our house, we have been watching a lot of Olympics this week. Have you? We have even been, no, some yes, some no. We've even been turning our couch cushions into a gymnastics mat, because the first time that we turned on the Olympics, it was men's diving, and they were starting to try it. And I didn't want anyone diving into the hardwood. So we made a mat. To achieve the Olympic level, that height, most of these athletes had to begin their training when they were very young. Katie Ledecky, the swimmer, Simone Biles, the gymnast, they each began their sports at age 6. Another athlete, one you've probably not heard of in judo, is her sport. Nigara Shaheen is at the Paris Olympics, but she's not representing a country. She's representing all people who live as refugees. This team is called the Olympic Refugee Team, and it's made up of 37 athletes from displaced people worldwide. Nigara was born in Afghanistan, but at 6 months old, her family fled the civil war. And she was living in a refugee camp in Pakistan when she first encountered the sport of judo at age 11. And she said that she knew the moment she stepped on the mat that she wanted to represent her country in the Olympics. Her mother has a picture of her competing in judo as a child in that refugee camp, and she had taken the photo and drawn the 5 Olympic rings on that photo. These athletes, that character of Thea, are people in whom it's easy for us to see that quintessential idea of call. People who are set apart, who seem to have a special talent. But I would like us to challenge ourselves to look inside, even as ordinary people, and recognize that we too have a thing that can't be denied. Even if it's not something that would ever make interesting television. Frederick Buechner, an American theologian and a pastor of the last century, described our calling as finding the hidden yearning of our lives. To do this, we have to filter out lots of sounds. We have to filter out what society tells us we ought to do. We have to filter out our self-protective instinct. And we have to listen for God's voice among all those voices. He writes, by and large, a good rule for finding out is this: the kind of work God usually calls you to do is the kind of work that you need most to do, and that the world most needs to have done. The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness meets the world's deep hunger. What gives you great joy when you are doing it? Certainly not every minute, but in sum total and time after time, what gives you joy? But we might ask, is it possible that God would want us to do what we love? I remember being completely shocked and thrilled by this revelation in my early 20s. I still remember where I was when it hit me in this epiphanic way. I was driving my 1993 Dodge Shadow, sitting at a red light at the corner of Clinton Avenue and 301 in my hometown. Jim probably knows right where that is. I think I had always associated serving God with sacrifice and drudgery, with a very narrow corridor of what might be right. What struck me in that moment, and what I have found confirmed in my life since, is if we are passionate about something, that is a sign that we can create meaning by and serve God in that something. Our loves, our joys, our passions, our gifts from God. And yet there's an intersection, a necessary intersection, the world's deep hunger. And this is where the idea of purpose and service come in. For we are not talking about personal fulfillment. We're talking about hearing God's voice call to us? Where is your deep gladness? And how can the practicing of that something answer a need that others have? Jesus taught us the paradox that if we lose our lives, we will find them. In my understanding, meaning that true happiness is found not by seeking happiness. If we go looking to be happy, we're going the wrong way. Instead, it's found by giving ourselves fully. Or from the flip side, joy and gladness won't be long-lived in a life focused on self. It is the turn to others that sustains joy. So how about Samuel? Samuel's call is interesting because in a way, it is mundane. Not the way he's called, that's extraordinary, but the thing he is asked to do. As a young boy, probably around 12, in the midst of his service to the priest Eli, Samuel heard a call, a voice, and it turned out to be God's voice. It wasn't a magnificent task that he received, not like Moses, who was called to bring his people out of slavery, not like Abraham, who was sent to a new land. God asked Samuel to go to his beloved teacher and tell him that he had done wrong by standing to the sidelines while his sons abused their power as priests. And because of this, his whole family would bear consequences. Samuel's call was to this very particular need. Perhaps Eli could only hear the message from such a loving messenger. But I think it's helpful for us to think about calling like this too, in small bites. Not necessarily a calling to a lifelong pursuit sometimes, but sometimes a calling is to a particular need in a particular moment. Are you the person who is positioned in place and gifts to meet a particular need at this moment? Or let me rephrase that, because I asked you a yes or no question, but it's not a yes or no question. It's a yes question. For which particular need are you the best person in this moment? Because you are important in God's beloved community. It's a yes, even when we doubt ourselves. Your history and your gifts and location have equipped you to give God's love in a particular way. Whether or not our stories are dramatic, or whether or not our lives seem that interesting to us, there is a way in which your life can be uniquely life-giving to others. There is a space which only you fill in God's ongoing giving of good to this world. So then, let us say together, "Speak, Lord, for your servants are listening."